Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast. This platform is for common sense people looking for up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information without the hot garbage corporate media bias. The power of one can lead to the power of many. You never know what small act that you may say or do that may literally change the lives of millions tomorrow. And don't you ever think that you can't make a difference, because you can. Good morning, my fellow Michiganders. Good morning, my fellow Americans. Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Garrett Soldano, and the media cycle is non-stop, especially with what happened this past week with the debate. Okay, so we're going to break some of that stuff down. But I just read on X this morning that the Democrat Party is split in half. They are battling each other for power, right? We have the Obama camp telling Biden that he has to go, and then we have the Biden camp and his family refusing to go. So who knows what's going on behind the scenes? Maybe Jill does not want to give up her extravagant lifestyle. Maybe Hunter Biden is scared to death of going in prison, so he needs his dad in the office to pardon him and help him out any way that he can. So it will be interesting. I did also read that Governor Whitmer is behind the scenes, and we all knew this, and she is nonstop going around the country and talking to folks to potentially be the Democrat nominee. So we will see. But you know what? It doesn't matter on our end. We always play the game like we're 5 points down. And that's the mentality that we have to bring to the table every single day. A lot can happen in 4 months. But we just have to continue to hammer down, as I say, continue to get out there, have conversations, expose the hot garbage, because that's what the Democrat Party does. My goodness gracious, it's been proven time and time again that they lie, and then the media runs with the lie. And then when the lie finally comes to surface that they've been lying, what do? They tell another lie, and then it's wash, rinse, do it again. That's what they do. Wash, rinse, repeat. All right. And so I want to just play some of the footage, because according to the mainstream media, Biden was absolutely mentally fine. He was fantastic. And all of us Republicans were doing was constantly putting out cheap fakes, as they said. Okay, so let's watch this video and watch the cheap fakes in action. Nothing to see here, right, folks? All cheap fakes. So when this came out, because I want to pause this video and I want to show you what they said about this video and how, like, no, everything was fine, okay? And then we're going to reflect back to what they talked about Biden's mental capacity, and with this gentleman saying this is the best he's ever seen Joe Biden, okay? So this was all before the debate. So let's watch this.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it.
And the universal reaction was somewhere approaching panic. The people who were texting with me were very concerned about President Biden seeming extremely feeble, seeming extremely weak.
And there is a conversation happening inside Biden's circle, and certainly a much more frank conversation happening inside the Democratic coalition. And I think there will be stories of a lot of concern about the performance tonight. And I think when
you say conversations happening, what do you mean?
I think people are talking. I think the conversations range from whether he should be in this race tomorrow morning to what was wrong with him. I mean, he has a cold.
He didn't do well at all. He did not do well at all. And he looked I'll give you the analysis. You kind of have the old man versus the con man. I can walk you through how I'm supposed to see it and say it, but I just want to speak from my heart. I love that guy. That's a good man. He loves his country. He's doing the best that he can. But he had a test to meet tonight to restore confidence of the country and of the base, and he failed to do that. And I think there's a lot of people who are going to want to see him consider taking a different course now.
Minutes into the debate, and it continues right now. It involves party strategists, it involves elected officials, it involves fundraisers. And they're having conversations about the president's performance, which they think was dismal, which they think will hurt other people down the party in the ticket, and they're having conversations about what they should do about it. Some of those conversations include, should we go to the White House and ask the president to step aside? Other of the conversations are about, should prominent Democrats go public with that call? Because they feel this debate was so terrible.
I think consistent with your reaction, Rachel, and others on the panel, it's kind of a DEFCON 1 moment. I think at the end of the day, the overwhelming reaction, again, it doesn't matter, quite frankly, what people like us say. Right. It's what voters say. And if they were already concerned about, is he up for it? And the way I think about it is, sadly, this really pains me to say this, they're 3 years apart. They seemed about 30 years apart tonight. And I think that's going to be the thing that voters really wrestle with coming out of this.
That was the debate. Look, we always want to be honest with you guys. I don't think we need to, you don't listen to us for us to sugarcoat anything. I think it was a fucking disaster. I think it was like maybe the worst debate I've ever seen in my entire life. It was so fucking awful because Joe Biden just in every single way failed at that debate. And I don't know what else to say there except that and then, I won't make any other predictions now, but it was a disaster.
38 years of covering politics, I've never heard a party panic the way I've been hearing them in the last 12 hours on the Democratic side. It's kind of like a political equivalent of a bank run, right?
I mean, you can't even talk about it anymore because it was so bad and everybody knew it. But it's interesting to watch on X the conversations that happen because you have like the Democrats trying to push a narrative right now where they say, hey, we don't vote for the individual. We're always going to vote for the party. And because that's what the Democrat Party is. There's no accountability within their own party, within their own ranks. They always get behind their candidates no matter what. And that's exactly what's going on. So don't let up on the accelerator, folks. You can't. Just because he went out there and bombed on the first debate, do not let up one single moment. You have to always go at this thing. Like I said, if you're 5 points down, it's halftime right now. And we have a bit of a lead, right? But no lead is safe. We have to continue to activate Michigan and America's greatest asset is we the people to continue to hammer down and to continue to mobilize and make these conversations happen and everything else because we have to win not only with President Trump, but up and down the ticket. We have to take back everything so we can start taking back lost ground because the Democrats have been doing this obviously for decades. So do not let up. Continue to be involved, continue to be activated, and I'll continue to bring the up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information. But it is great to watch the Democrat Party implode on itself. That is for sure, because they are just, they have been interesting. We'll say that, which leads me to my next conversation I'm going to have today. I'm going to bring on Hillsdale County's constitutional sheriff candidate and one of my personal close friends, John-Paul Rutan, and he's going to talk about his candidacy right now, what's going on in Hillsdale County. And before I bring him on, unfortunately, not only have we lost an officer in Oakland County, but we also lost another officer in Hillsdale County. So obviously all of our prayers and support go out to those families in those communities who are hurting right now, because when an officer goes down, it has a very, very huge impact on that community. So our prayers are going out to those family members right now. So let me bring in John-Paul Rutan to the show. What's going on, my man?
Not too much. How are you, Garrett?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy life, obviously, because you're running for sheriff in Hillsdale County. So welcome.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So I want to give people a little bit of history about you and I, because when I ran for governor, which seems like a lifetime ago, I came out to Hillsdale County and spoke. And I remember you taking me to the side after I spoke and say, hey, we need to have a conversation. And you invited me back to Hillsdale County to actually go in to the very office that you're in right now and sit down and actually go through the Constitution. And I'm going to be honest, John, is I was very ignorant and I didn't know a lot about the Constitution when I stood up during those lockdowns. I was just your ordinary citizen that was fed up, that felt in my heart and soul that something was off, that this was wrong. And you took the time, and we probably spent a few hours in that office where you were just going through, in detail what the Constitution is, what it's about, our rights and responsibilities, our responsibilities as citizens to do when it gets infringed upon. And so I just wanted to give people a little bit of history about how you and I met.
Yeah, that was while that campaign was going on, we'd had all the governor candidates here. And I got to tell you, there wasn't one that answered my constitutional question at all.
Which is scary,
Mm-hmm.
which it is, because you have candidates. And I think that happens up and down the ticket. I just don't think people don't know what they don't know. And I think it's important to really, if you're going to run for some type of elected office, is to educate you on those pieces of paper, those words on that piece of paper specifically.
Well, the problem is we've been intentionally dumbed down in America through our John Dewey model of public school. We don't teach the Constitution. We don't teach the founding principles of this country. I ask a lot of kids, what kind of a government do we have? And I always get democracy. Well, we're definitely not a democracy. All I have to do is have them recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And I always ask them, does it say into the democracy? No, it says to the republic, or a Republican form of government. And we're guaranteed that under Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution.
And that's why I think, and that's why I'm having you on the show, and especially other constitutional sheriffs to talk about this, because we know that this is probably, if not one of the most, or the most important elected official positions that we can put in, because the constitutional sheriff will hold the line against the state overreach, against the federal overreach. And a lot of people are awakened, me included, right? When the unconstitutional lockdowns and mandates had happened, and there were sheriffs that stood up, and there were sheriffs obviously just bent the knee, which is unfortunate. And so that's why I think it's very important to educate people and to have you guys on and girls on to really talk about what you're willing to do in these types of situations.
Well, the Sheriff Richard Mack started an organization called the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. And that's a national organization. There's quite a few sheriffs that are in that organization. Sadly, in Michigan, we only have one, and that's Dar Leaf out of Berry County. And he's been an extremely good constitutional sheriff. He happens to be on our national board. I'm the state director for the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. And right now, this election, we've got 5 counties that have candidates that are CSPOA members that are running for that office.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have Richard Mack on here soon. His people reached out to me, and that's why I reached out to you about him. And I'm excited to hopefully bring him on in the near future to take this conversation even further. So you and I have been friends for several years now, and you know that what happened in 2020 obviously holds weight with me when I talk to people. And so I want to get into some questions with you, John, and I know the answers to this because I know how strong you believe in the Constitution. But for the people who don't know you, I want to get it basically from the horse's mouth of what you believe and what you're going to stand for. So let's talk about red flag laws. Obviously, it's a very hot item, right?
Yes.
And look, I talked to the other candidate last week that's going for Kalamazoo County about red flag laws. Hey, they look pretty on paper, right? Because when people read red flag laws, they're like, yeah, obviously we don't want people that are schizophrenic, somebody who's mentally disturbed to have access to guns because they're going to go in and they're going to do this, they're going to do that. But the problem with that now is we have the judicial system that's been weaponized, right? Mm-hmm. And we have judges and prosecutors who are not following the Constitution. They're following their political beliefs. Mm-hmm. So you get your day in court, right? If they come in and confiscate your Second Amendment, but then you got to go fight against these corrupt judges and prosecutors. And, 9 times out of 10, they're going to go follow their political beliefs, unfortunately. And for me personally, I went through that. They didn't confiscate my Second Amendment, but the FBI came in and interviewed me because I was a radical right extremist for a quote that I did. So what is your views? Let's say the red flag laws happen and you're supposed to confiscate people's guns, and let's say, let's go even further. Let's not even talk about red flag laws. Let's say there's a national assault rifle ban, right? That's what they like to call it, the assault rifle, which we all know AR doesn't stand for that, but they're going to go after our Armalite, our AR-15s, right? And they're going to do a door-to-door gun confiscation. And so what are you going to do as a constitutional sheriff if that happens, if the federal and state government decide to do that?
Well, obviously, I'm going to refuse. With the red flag laws, let's look at that. You brought that up. Everybody says, well, people get their due process after their property is taken. Well, that's not the Constitution, isn't it? The Constitution says that you'll get due process before life, liberty, or property is taken. So you can't have the property taken and then have due process. That's not how it works, because then you're guilty and you have to prove your innocence. And again, that's not how that works. You're supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. So red flag laws are a problem all the way around. Now, a lot of people say, well, it sounds reasonable, John. These red flag laws, we should have it. Well, let me explain to you. Good people can do evil things with the best of intentions or out of complete ignorance. And that's what these red flag laws are, is the best of intentions and absolute ignorance. We have to follow the principle. Now, principles only work when we follow them, not when we preach them. So we have to practice the principle. And that is, everybody gets due process prior to life, liberty, or property being taken. Plain and simple. So any law that would require you to have property taken from you prior to due process violates my oath. And I'm not going to violate my oath.
And see, that's why I was so excited to have you on, because your knowledge of the Constitution, because you're running obviously for a very, very important position, and people don't even know that.
No,
they don't even know that. They don't even know what the rights are. And so it's very easy for state and federal, even local government, if they're corrupt, to come in and violate those rights. And people just will blindly consent, right? And
yes.
that's why we need to have these conversations in the education with people, so they start to know exactly what's going on. So you kind of hit on, what your role is as the constitutional sheriff that you are. But what's the most important thing that you can do as sheriff?
Well, let's go back to the year 1215, the Magna Carta. And this is where we have to go back to. And in subsection 61 of the Magna Carta is where the sheriff gets his ancient power. Now, prior to 1215, the sheriff, or the shire reeve, was second only to the king in the realm. When he was out in the shire, he was the same as the king. So you have a sheriff that has state authority that works for the state. In subsection 61, it said that if the king or the king's people take anything from you, and they did it illegally, they shouldn't have taken it, you could go state your case to 4 of the 25 barons. And if they agreed, then the king had 10 days to restore you, make you whole again. And if the king didn't do that, the sheriff had the duty and the authority to assail the king. Now, assail is a very strong word. That means that's a forcible taking. The sheriff, the only thing he had to spare is the life and limb of the royal family. Other than that, he could do whatever needed to take back what the king took and restore it to the people. So at that point in time, at 1215 and subsection 61, the sheriff had state authority, but he worked for the people, not the state. So this is an important distinction to understand. And this is where our founding fathers, these are the lessons that they looked at in the history that they studied to set our founding documents up. And so we have to understand that ancient power. Without understanding that beginning, it's impossible to truly be a good sheriff.
So with all that being said, what drove you to run? Because this is your second time, right? You ran back.
This is my fourth time.
Fourth time.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you are the definition of persistence. That's why I love you, John. That is
never quit.
So that is good. And so why are you continually running? Obviously, you believe is what's going on in Hillsdale County, that you're like, hey, we need somebody that's going to have the chums to do what's right, according to those very words that were inked on that piece of paper.
Well, I saw a lot of injustice happening, and that bothered me greatly. Now, I could do one of two things. I could either stand and fight for my home that I love and my neighbors and my family that I love, or I could sell and move somewhere better. I could move to a different state. I could move to a different county. But that's not what I do. I fight. And so I decided the best way to do this was to educate myself on the position of sheriff and on the Constitution. And wow, what an education I got when I started to really get into the ancient documents and study the original writings of our founders. It gave me a completely different outlook on America. It gave me a completely different outlook on the position of sheriff, on our elected officials in general. And so I decided to run. And like I say, I've been 3 times unsuccessful. And people go, well, you're a 3-time loser. Why would you run again? Well, I always look at them and I say, what are you running for? And they go, well, nothing. See, there's a lot of courage into just running. You understand that, getting into the political game. Every 4 years, my name gets slandered and libeled. My family gets attacked. It's the mutual abuse of parties and of character. And Franklin warned us of that, but that's human nature. That's just how it works. Now, my thing is, I don't see myself as, when I don't win, as being unsuccessful. See, when I run, someone else has to run faster. When I run, they're always worried about what's going on, so they have to be a little bit more transparent. So whether I'm successful at reaching that goal of being sheriff or not, I count it as a success every time I run. And so I won't stop running.
I absolutely love that, John. I've never heard of it put that way, but you're exactly right. It makes those other candidates be a little sharper, be a little transparent. And it's just kind of like you take a little bit of ground, you take a little bit of ground. That is fantastic. Thank you for saying that. You just grew me, that's for sure, mentally, because that's what people have to understand. Because, yeah, people always think when they lose and that's it, throw in the towel. That's it. No, you keep fighting. You keep fighting. Go back to Abraham Lincoln. Look at his history in politics, right? He got throttled all the time, but he never quit. And he ended up being one of the best presidents in this country. Let's go into an example that I like, because a lot of mandates happen with the mask mandates and everything else has happened, but sometimes there's laws put in place or rules put in place and people unfortunately blindly follow. Let's go back to 1955 with Rosa Parks. And obviously everybody familiar with history understands what happened. All right. She was arrested in Alabama for failing to give up her seat to a white man. Knowing what we know now about equality and justice, let's say you went back in time, John, and you were the sheriff, or let's say the officer to this call. What would you have done in that situation?
Well, first thing I'm going to do is do an investigation if I get called on something. I'm going to come in and get both sides of the story to find out what's going on. And upon, now that we know all the facts, upon finding the facts that the bus driver wanted this black woman to move to the back of the bus, I would have said, well, that's not going to happen. And what I would have done is sat down next to her and rode with her on to her stop and made sure that she was protected on the way home, understanding the situation at the time and the emotions that would be there. And I would make sure that she made her way all the way home and safe. She has that right, regardless of what a state legislature signs into law. The oath is greater than the pen of the legislature, and the Constitution is the supreme law.
Absolutely. Let's move on, because I know I'm from the Hillsdale area and your neighboring county, Lenawee County, Onstead, Michigan. A lot of farmers there.
Yep.
whole lot of farmers.
Mhm.
And the big thing that you're seeing in some states right now, especially I saw in Pennsylvania, is the federal and state bureaucracies are raiding these farms and destroying the dairy products, that are distributing raw cheese, raw milk, right? What would you do about that in your county?
Well, the first thing is a lot of people say, well, what's the sheriff doing? Well, first off, he has to have a complaint, right? So somebody needs to make the complaint. When the complaint is made, then the sheriff or his deputies need to do a thorough investigation. The same situation happened in Elkhart, Indiana with Brad Rogers, who was a CSPOA sheriff as well. He had an Amish farmer down there that the Department of Agriculture was raiding the farmer's farm every month. And they would come in and tip over milk jugs and dump milk. And, this is how they make their living. And all because he did the most heinous thing thought of. He sold raw milk to someone that wanted it. And so he was being raided every month, and the Department of Justice had set up a grand jury and had notified the farmer that he needed to go to Detroit to this grand jury. And so they contacted their local sheriff, who happened to be Brad Rogers. And he went to the farm and he investigated. And he went to the people who bought the milk. He asked them, did you want to buy raw milk? Yep. And they said, we requested it. And he said, okay. Did anybody get sick? No, nobody got sick. So he went to the farmer and looked at him. He said, okay, what kind of operation do you have here? How are you doing your operation? What's the cleanliness of the operation? How are you doing this? And he looked at it. He saw no problem. And so thereby, we don't have a complainant. There is no corpus delicti, no victim, no crime. So the only people that were claiming victimhood was the Department of Agriculture and the DOJ. And so he said, well, we got to do something about this. So he called Sheriff Richard Mack and conferred with him. And he said, what do we do about this situation? And Richard said, well, I'll help you write a letter. And so that letter basically went to the Department of Agriculture, and it said, if you come into my county without written permission and without a true bill, and you step 1 foot on any piece of property in this county, I will arrest your officers and impound your vehicles. So let your friends know at the DOJ that the same thing goes for them. And he wrote that letter. Now, of course, people don't realize how much courage it takes for a sheriff to stand up against both federal and or state government, because they don't like that. And they're going to pull all the dirty tricks they can. I mean, look what happened to Trump with all these ridiculous trials. So that's what the sheriff's going to go through. So there was a few nights Brad didn't sleep very well, for sure. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to do that. And a week later, the farmer received a letter from the DOJ that said that the grand jury had been canceled and they were leaving the farmer alone. So, Brad had a lot of courage in doing that. Now in Indiana, they have term limits. So Brad's not the sheriff down there anymore, but he became a county commissioner. We've had, there's many examples of, excuse me, many examples of how CSPOA or constitutional sheriffs have stood up against both state and federal government. We had a sheriff down in, I believe it's Liberty County, Florida, and he had the same situation as far as the Second Amendment goes. He didn't believe in a lot of the gun laws that were placed on the people that were unconstitutional. And so he decided that his oath was important to uphold with the Second Amendment. He had an officer pull a gentleman over one night that had a gun laying on the front seat of the car. And so the officer arrested the man. He pulled him over for a taillight, or I believe it was a fix-it ticket. And this is a county where there's a lot of open area, very few people, long, dark highways. And so this gentleman had a gun. And so when the officer pulled him over and saw the gun on the seat, he arrested him and took him to the jail. And the sheriff, once he found out that this man had been taken to the jail for that, he went to the jail and he asked the deputy, did this man threaten anyone with the gun? The answer was no. Did he brandish the weapon? The answer was no. Did he do anything illegal or threatening or assaultive with that weapon? And the answer was no. So at that point in time, the sheriff said, well, release him from the jail and strike his name from the booking. And when that happened, that officer, who was of a different political persuasion than the sheriff, contacted the governor that was of an opposite political persuasion of the sheriff. And the governor pulled the sheriff from that county, and it went to a lawsuit. It went to the Florida Supreme Court, and basically the Florida Supreme Court said, no, Governor, you don't have the ability to take that sheriff out of his position. It's a constitutional position, and it's the people that put the sheriff there, and it's the people that take the sheriff out. And so they restored the sheriff, and they said that basically the sheriff's oath, he has an obligation to his oath, and he has the ability to do that. And if the people don't like what the sheriff is doing, then it's up to the people to take the sheriff out of that position. And so we've had many examples of things like that. You've got Sheriff David Clark from Wisconsin. He was under attack for telling his people that, the police can't be everywhere and that they should get guns and defend themselves. And that's why the Second Amendment's there. We're one of the only countries in the world where the people are armed. And it protected us during World War II, and it protects us today. These are inherent rights given to us by our Creator, not granted to us by government through paper. And so a sheriff that takes an oath to that, if he's going to take an oath to the Constitution, he needs to know the Constitution. He has to understand the principles and the founding behind it. And now I get a lot of people that say, now, how can the sheriff do that? The sheriff has to do follow the law. Whatever the legislature signs in, he has to follow that law. Well, I would refer them to Federalist 39, written by Madison, in which he talks about the spheres of control. This falls under the doctrine of lesser magistrate. And that is, Madison says in 39 that the general power doesn't have any authority in the local sphere, no more than the local power has any authority in the general sphere. So that means because we're a compound republic and we've been broken up into these smaller republics, the county and the sheriff is the chief executive of that county. He's put in place by the people, and he has state authority, and he's there with his state authority to work for the people, not for the government. And so when we understand the very principles in the spheres of control, or the doctrine of lesser magistrate, we understand that the sheriff absolutely has that power and authority to step in and say, it doesn't matter what the legislature signed, is it constitutional? Now, a lot of people say, well, that's got to go to the Supreme Court.
John, obviously my video quit working.
Yes.
Way to take over the show, my man. You became the host real quick.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, you're great, man. That was perfect. That's why it was exciting to watch you just continue to share your knowledge with the folks. So I am going to be hidden, obviously. But I have a really important question for you that I want people to understand. You get elected, John. What are you going to do for Hillsdale?
Defend the rights of the people. I will be the stopgap and the firewall between an overreaching federal, state, and local authority and the people. That's my job.
So with that being said, what changes need to happen in Hillsdale as of right now, if there are any? Like What's going on in Hillsdale where we need someone like you in there? Can you give us some examples?
Yes, there's some big changes that need to happen. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. We know this to be true. Lord Acton wrote that to the bishop, and it was as true then as it is now. Our founding fathers even understood that when they said that they need to put these little architectural checks and balances within the Constitution so that it wasn't just a parchment barrier, so that there were real checks and balance, real natural law checks and balances. One of the problems with the sheriff's department is it becomes very easy to hide things. It becomes very easy for the public to not know what's going on. And let's be fair, a lot of times the public, with their apathy, doesn't care what's going on, but they should very much care what's going on in that department. So if I'm to believe that millions of people before me have succumbed to power, how am I to believe that I'm so righteous that it won't happen to me? That would make me the stupidest person in the room. So I understand I'm human, and it's a human trait. So what are the checks and balances? Well, we can go to what our founding fathers set up to understand those checks and balances. One of the things I want to set up is a Citizens Advisory Council. We have 18 townships in Hillsdale County. With those 18 townships, what I want to do is, and the township gets to decide how they want to do it. If they want to have a vote, if they want to appoint, if they want to have somebody volunteer, whichever they want to do, it's completely up to that township how they do it. But I want to have one person from each township set as a Citizens Advisory Council. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to set it up into 4 separate classes, such as because we have 18, it's going to be 5, 4, 5, and 4. So on January 1st, the first 5 are elected, and they'll serve for a year. And then in alphabetical order, the next 4 on April 1st will come in. And then the next 5 in alphabetical order on the next quarter, and then the next 4 on the last quarter. Now, what that'll do is that'll create continuity where there's people that are there that understand and know what's going on when the new people come in, and they can help them get up to speed. But it's also going to bring in new eyes, new ears all the time into the sheriff's department. Now, every time I've done this, the sheriffs I've run against has said, well, I'm the sheriff, I'll make the decisions. No, the Citizens Advisory Group isn't there to make the decisions. They're there to look over my shoulder. They're there to scrutinize me. That department belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to the sheriff. The sheriff is but a caretaker of that office. That office belongs to the people, and the people need to know what's going on. Now, obviously, we can't have investigations or information of investigations going out, but things that are going on in the department, now we've got a board of citizens that are looking over it. Now, a lot of people go, well, Rutan's just going to want people that agree with him in there. No, absolutely not. It's going to make my job hard, and it's going to make life a living hell. But I want people that like me and people that hate me on that board, because that's the only way that I will not become corrupt, because I'm human, and power works on all humans. It's the natural nature of man. And in understanding that and setting up a board that way, I can make sure that I can lay my head down at night and I can shave with my eyes open without worrying about cutting my own throat, because I will not become a tyrant.
I tell you what, John, just that answer right there is the mic drop for anyone that's ever wants to run for any level of office, is that accountability.
Yep.
Because you're right. And power corrupts, absolute. Power corrupts, absolutely. How many times have we seen it time and time again? And that answer right there is having that own personal accountability is huge. And that's what every single American should expect from out of every single elected official. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, and not only for running, but also sharing your wisdom, because I really think a lot of people need to understand what that piece of paper stands for, what your rights are, your responsibility to uphold those rights, especially if you're running for any elected office. I mean, it's just the education is always impressive when talking to you, John.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. If there is, if I could take just a minute to say a couple things, like I haven't said a couple things already. I do want to say Thursday that we had a tragedy here and we lost a very good officer, Officer Bill Butler. And my condolences go out to his family and to the community. But I want everybody to realize too that the assailant was dispatched as well. And there is no corruption of blood in our Constitution. And we have to remember as a community that there's two families hurting. We don't get to choose what our family does and what people in our family do. But you can't judge the family for what a family member has done. And so with keeping the sheriff in your prayers, because look, I understand what he's going through too. He needs our prayers. And the family of the fallen officer need our prayers. The community needs our prayers. But the family that lost the assailant, that was somebody's son as well. And we need to keep that family in our prayers as well.
Wise words, John. Thank you so much for coming on the show, my man.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's always a good time with you.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye. Wow. Sorry for the video malfunction. Obviously, we're getting a different angle right now, which is fine. But I wanted you all to hear John. I wanted you to not only see the wisdom that this guy has, the knowledge of the Constitution, but also how personable he is. I would be proud to have somebody like that represent me in my county. And that's what we all should expect out of our elected officials is people like John. And you know, I don't endorse people before the primary, but John has my 100% support in what he's trying to do. The guy is simply amazing. So if you're in Hillsdale County, make sure that you're having a conversation with John and all the other candidates. Just don't vote on who has the right name. Let's get the knowledge out there. Let's see what they have to say. Let's ask them some questions, some hard questions, just like I did with John today. And that's how we take back our local communities, our state, but most importantly, our country. So God bless you. God bless the state of Michigan, of course, and always. God bless these United States. Till next time.